At 59, Leslie Kenny is the picture of good health and youthful energy, with barely a grey hair on her head. It's a far cry from the position she found herself in 20 years ago, when a doctor told her she had just 5 good years of life left. With a severely compromised immune system and multiple autoimmune conditions, her future looked bleak. But Leslie believed her diet and lifestyle was playing a big part, and so began her journey of healing and recovery. Armed with her own experience and the knowledge she's acquired along the way, she's since co-founded the Oxford Longevity Project to help others live healthier for longer. And she's here with me today to share her inspiring story and the secrets behind her remarkable health turnaround. Leslie, welcome to the channel.
Thank you so much for inviting me, Claire.
Well, I am very glad that you could join us because yours is such a fascinating and inspiring story. And I mean, you're a picture of health and vitality now, but that's not always been the case. So can you take us back to the period leading up to what was a pretty devastating diagnosis? When and how did your health problems begin?
So about 20 years ago, when I was 39 years old, I was trying desperately to have a child, and had been trying for about 5 years at that point. And I was undergoing my 5th IVF round and began to notice that my hands were aching, and it felt like I imagined arthritis must feel like to an older person. But I was sure, being 39, that this couldn't be me. So I went to my doctor, as you would, and just said, you know, what is it? What have I done? How do you fix this? And she ran a few tests, and I didn't think anything of it because my mind was very focused on this 5th IVF round. We were using donor eggs, and it's quite complicated to get that figured out. But I got a phone call from my doctor's office, and instead of it being the nurse saying your bloods are all clear, nothing to worry about, it was actually my doctor, who didn't give me the results but asked me to come in for a chat.
Oh.
Yeah,
we don't like that.
Yeah, precisely. That was the look I had on my face. That kind of, wait a second, that's not usually what I'm told. So I went into her office and got the results, and she said, "Congratulations, you were right. Gold star for figuring this out. You do indeed have rheumatoid arthritis." And I thought, well, isn't that for older people? And while my own father had died at age 39, I don't think any of us feel like this is our time, right? We're going to go at 39. It just seems too early, and too early to get any kind of a chronic disease. So she said, don't worry, we've got these injectable immune suppressants. Your immune system is, it looks like it's fighting cancer. And I said, but isn't that good? And she said, actually, no, because instead of fighting cancer, it's destroying your own tissues. And in this case, it's your joints that your immune system is attacking. So these immune suppressants are going to bring your immune system under control so they don't do that. But it also means your immune system won't be able to fight other pathogens. So just avoid social situations with a lot of people, stay away from children, little children have a lot of
just become
sniffles.
A hermit and you'll be fine.
Exactly. And I said, well, but I want to have children. That's unfortunate. And, no comment. But then she said, you've also got something else, though. And I said, oh, what's that? And she said, you have lupus. And I said, okay, so what do I take for that? And what is it? And she said, well, unfortunately, there isn't anything we have for lupus. And it is a progressive condition that attacks your organs and tissues. And I said, well, what does that mean? And she said, well, it will just get worse, unfortunately. And I said, of course, like most patients, I asked, is there anything I can do? Can I eat anything, sleep more, exercise? Can I take anything? Are there any experimental drugs? Anything I can do to reverse this? And she said, unfortunately, there isn't. And I said, well, look, this is really inconvenient. Getting mad here for a minute. I am doing my 5th IVF and I'm using donor eggs, and it's so hard to find a biracial donor. And there's a lot writing on this. It's taken me a long time to tee this all up and get my ducks in a row. This isn't good. You're the doctor. Shouldn't you have the answers? And she just said, don't do it. Don't do this round. And I was thinking, we are already in it. I'm already taking the drugs to prepare my uterus to receive the embryo from this donor. There's not really a lot I can do. And she just said, don't do it. You have a good 5 years left. And
by that, she meant
5 years.
5 years of good health left, or 5 years left?
Well, my interpretation when she said don't do it was don't leave this child. Even if you were lucky enough to get pregnant, you have 5 years left with this kid. Don't do it. And
wow.
And I thought, I think that when a doctor says anything like that to you, whether it means 5 years of good health or 5 years finito, you are thinking, well, was that it? Game over? And it's a conversation stopper. I'd already asked her, are these results reliable? Could my test have gotten mixed up with somebody else? Somebody else's? She said, we did multiple tests, whole panels. They all show the same thing. This immune system is out of control. There's only so much pushback a patient is able to do, even for somebody reasonably assertive like myself.
And you're in a shock in a situation like that. So you walk out and there's 100 things that come to mind, but in an initial diagnosis, you haven't got your facts together. You can't ask the right questions.
I'd never heard of lupus. I didn't know what it meant. Taking on rheumatoid arthritis, which was a disease I associated with people in their 60s, was already a lot. And I was very focused on this IVF cycle and the embryo transfer, and just thinking, I need to be as healthy as possible. This is not going to make me as healthy and as hospitable as I can be to this embryo. This is not good. Like, what are the implications of me taking these injectables while I'm having this embryo transfer? I basically said, look, can I take this test again? And she shrugged her shoulders and said, what's your insurance policy? Sure, do it again. And she'd already told me there was nothing that I could do. But luckily, I had some healthy skepticism and felt like, come on, there must be something I can do to be comparatively better so that when I'm working with my doctor, I'm a slightly healthier patient. And so for me, I was always looking for comparative improvement. So maybe not eating the sugar donut, maybe making a healthier food choice, the salad over, the McDonald's burger. And I just thought, surely there must be something I can do. So I left her office that day thinking, I'm going to learn everything I can about this disease. And I'm going to do whatever I can, even if it means I only get an increase of 1% improvement. It'll be worth it because I will be that much better than I am right now.
And it could slow things down, according to her prognosis. Can I ask though, what was your lifestyle up to that point? I can't imagine you eating a lot of McDonald's.
I didn't eat a lot of McDonald's, but I was living in the United States. And the food supply, I have to say, is not great. And I don't think it has gotten better since I've left the US, which was also around 18 years ago. There's so much processed food. And so I did eat a lot of pasta. I love pasta. I love bread. I did eat a lot of wheat-based foods. I had a lot of dairy. I like cheese. I was married to a Brit. He loved cheese. He basically lived on Welsh rarebit. Milkshakes, loved milkshakes. All of those things are not inherently unhealthy, but if you overdo them to the exclusion of things that your body needs, like vegetables and fruit and high quality sources of protein and especially fiber for the health of the gut biome, then it's going to be a problem. And in my case, I decided to do an allergy test because when I studied the immune system, it was very clear. The immune system reacts to certain things. And I thought, maybe my immune system is reacting to allergens. So I did an allergy test. It became clear that I was allergic to dairy, gluten, even eggs, peanut butter, things that I liked. So I removed all of those things. And I also discovered that both lupus and rheumatoid arthritis have inflammation as their root cause. And I thought, if I can do everything I can to reduce inflammation in my body, then I remove all the triggers to the immune system, maybe I can help my body better deal with these illnesses.
Sort of rebooting the immune system, that feels like. That was the goal.
Well, that was the goal. And so those things were supportive, but I then also discovered a really unique therapy, which was called intravenous immunoglobulin, or IVIG. It's just called IVIG in the US. It's a transfusion. And it's taken from plasma from lots of donors. I mean, we're talking hundreds of donors. I read that this was resetting the immune system in other lupus and rheumatoid arthritis patients. So they might, at that time, the trials were very small, but around 13 people in a trial, and it was showing efficacy. And I thought, if this might reset my immune system and put me in remission, then that's what I want. I would prefer to do that rather than just manage my illnesses. So I looked into this therapy, and it was something that my insurance would cover. It was $12,000 at the time per transfusion. So I needed 2, so it was $24,000. And this is something that Professor Ed Bullmore, who runs the psychiatry department at the University of Cambridge, has written a book about called The Inflamed Mind. He talks about there being a cytokine storm, a kind of autoimmune reaction in the brain being the cause of bipolar. So in some countries, like Bahrain, IVIG is actually used when somebody has when they have psychosis. Wow. And because it's considered in a cytokine storm, an inflammatory storm, as it were. So it is available in some places, but in the US, was not something that most doctors would have turned to. I had to really advocate for it. And it's a reason that I'm so passionate about patients doing their homework. We don't come with owner's manuals. Every single one of us is bio-individual, and we kind of have to learn about our bodies. And the burden is on us to learn as much about our bodies as we possibly can. And as mothers, we have to do the same for our children, right? And we've got to advocate for them because there is no owner's manual. And we have absolutely got to go to our doctors who do not have the same kind of data points that we get. We get them 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We know when something is wrong because we know how we were before. And I always say each person should think back to that moment when they jumped out of bed, they loved their day, they wanted to get up and get out there and do life. That's how we should feel every single day. And if you don't, you need to examine why you don't feel that way and fix it. And it's a challenge.
That landed. Mm-hmm.
That's a challenge, but that shows each of us what we are capable of, right? So I knew things weren't right. I advocated for myself and I said, I really want to try this therapy. Here is the clinical evidence that it seems to be helping. And anyway, my doctor says I have only 5 years left to live. So either I sit back and wait for the inevitable to happen, or I at least am proactive. And I have agency over my life. And I try this therapy, even if it fails. At least I have the satisfaction of knowing I did not sit around waiting for the Grim Reaper, right?
Yeah.
So my doctor did prescribe it. I got those 2 transfusions, and I believe it was the combination of resetting the immune system and then removing triggers to the immune system, the dairy, the gluten, the peanuts, the eggs. At that time, when you remove these things, it doesn't have to be forever. But I did all those things, and within 6 months, I went back and I tested. Went into my doctor's office. She just thought she was having a routine consult with a patient who was, chronic illness patient. She opened my folder and she said, "Well, look at that. You don't have lupus anymore, and you don't have RA." And it was so quiet. It was the sound of the penny dropping. Because I suddenly realized our doctors are not infallible. They are not gods. They are very close. They have great knowledge, but they do not know everything.
And she didn't say to you, "What have you been doing these last 6 months?"
No, and I said, "Do you want to know what I did?" And she said, "No, that's okay." But I think most doctors are under huge time pressure. And, they've got a conveyor belt of patients coming through. They don't have time to hear someone's long saga. I mean, for all she knew, I could have gone to, I don't know, I could have gone to some Buddha, rubbed his tummy, and that was what I thought was the magic elixir. So, in her defense, I think doctors may get this option to hear their patients. I think that it is a can of worms they don't want to open.
And spontaneous regression of things, it happens. And sometimes in medicine, they just write it off as exactly that.
It can happen. Exactly. I know there's a book by a Harvard University professor on this. But it was my first introduction to my own power as a patient. And as I said, I want everyone to know that they too have the same ability that I have to make an impact on their diagnosis. You are not your diagnosis. It is a snapshot at this moment in time, but we now know, for instance, diabetes, that does not have to be type 2 diabetes, does not have to be a lifelong diagnosis. You can reverse it. And in Britain, we saw it with Tom Watson, the deputy leader of the Labour Party, who famously did this. And I think that, no matter what your politics are, hats off to him for doing this. That's a great story. And I think it's one every patient needs to know. You can influence your diagnosis. This is not your destiny. It does not have to be. And I think even just a comparative gain is better. I mean, we won't all necessarily be able to go into remission like I did or like Tom Watson did, but we can get close, and that's still better, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So that was 6 months after your initial diagnosis. There you were, and you'd been told, you're good to go. Whatever it was, you've sorted it. What happened from there? Because obviously you've now gone down a path where you are really looking at optimal health. So when you left that office that day, how had your mindset changed, you think, about life?
I think that for one thing, the IVF round, the embryo transfer, had failed. And the embryologist on transfer had actually said to me, "I don't know why you use these donor eggs. Your eggs were much better quality than these," which was horrible because I paid a lot for those eggs. But again, it made me realize that I was not as broken as the IVF doctor or my GP had told me, and that in fact, my body did have some good instincts. And the fact that it could right the ship told me that maybe in the future I could get pregnant naturally, even though I was 39. So at that point, at age 39, they don't say it's idiopathic infertility. They say it's due to old age. So idiopathic just means doctors don't know. It's just a fancy word for we have no idea why you were infertile. And that's what I had been up until age 38. And the day I turned 39, I suddenly, the explanation was clear. I was too old. I began to question all these other things that the doctors had said. I'd also taken a year off of university at UC Berkeley as an undergrad to take care of my grandmother who had a brain tumor. So I wanted to take care of her at home in the Midwest. And, we'd been told the chemo and the drugs were the only thing for her. She was essentially in a coma for the last year of her life. I fed her through a feeding tube. We changed her catheter. We rolled her every 2 hours. So she didn't get bed sores. And I began to question everything. Was there a way I could have helped her? And I read a book called Living Proof by a University of Oxford professor who had been diagnosed with bone cancer, who ended up not doing the chemo, who actually was able to go himself into remission from that, and was one of the longest lived bone cancer patients in Great Britain at the time he died 8 years later. All of these things just gave me the strength to raise my hand and say, I think there might be another path towards healing, and I think it might involve the patient. And if we could collaborate together with our doctors, can you imagine how powerful this might be? And
yeah, exactly. Because you always, there's always a slight concern for me sometimes when we're talking about healing naturally, because I've got such belief in what you're saying. I think there's so much we can do through diet and exercise. But I'm always keen that is in tandem with traditional medicine right now, because it's as much as we've got. It's as good as we've got, isn't it, really? So we can do both and hopefully, amplify those treatments.
Yeah, absolutely. As a matter of fact, Muir Gray, who was the NHS's chief knowledge officer for many years and a fellow Scot from Glasgow, he always says that the biggest missing piece in modern medicine is the patient. And he's right. And there's so many things that we can do. And as we get older, the number one reason why we go into care homes, it's not these diseases. It's actually our inability to sit down and get up from the toilet by ourselves. When you think about that, you realize how much control we patients have and the importance of exercise. But, we must get involved. We really must.
Yeah, and this is a conversation I've had several times recently, actually. Firstly, with a 72-year-old bodybuilder who, had very poor mobility in her late 50s. And now she's tours all over the world doing her bodybuilding competitions. She's in the shape of her life. But also talking to a physical therapist who had been he works with quite a lot of elderly clients, but one in particular, 95 years of age, walked in after a fall. Most people would be walking into being pushed into the care home at that point. She came into the gym, had been training with barbells, and at 97 years old had a DEXA scan that showed improvement in her bone density.
It's amazing. So
isn't it? It's incredible.
It's never too late. This is it. It is never too late. And don't give up, right? Don't give up hope, because the body has an innate wisdom, but we need to support it. We have a personal responsibility. We cannot outsource our health to our doctors or the medical system, as great as it is.
Well, look how overwhelmed our medical systems are as well, because we've got aging populations. And at the moment, a lot of us don't know. We're just only beginning to learn how possible it is to actually age better. And I think this is the key. This is the key. If people can take a bit more, actually feel a bit more inspired about what they can do for their health in later life and to protect against loss of mobility and so on, we could be in potentially a very different situation. I'd love to ask you what you think that longevity lifestyle looks like. What are the main things we can do?
So I did a course through the University of Colorado at Boulder. That's where I was living in the US. And it was with the person who runs the American Gut Project, Rob Knight. So he's sort of the Tim Spector, the head of the same project in the US that Tim Spector runs here. And in the course, there were two things that stood out for me. One was that each of us has a unique set of bacteria in our gut biome. These are things we have inherited through the maternal line. So it's quite ancient, this bacteria. And it is passed to the baby as the baby passes through the birth canal. And we need to keep those colonies of bacteria healthy because they are capable of creating this amazing pharmacopoeia for us. Everything from B vitamins to serotonin, one of the key happiness hormones, to things like spermidine, which activates this process of cell renewal and recycling. All of these things are made in the gut biome. But if we do not support those colonies of healthy bacteria with fiber, and primarily this is only coming from plants, from vegetables and fruit, then those colonies can die, or they can dwindle down to become so small that they cannot produce enough of these key molecules that our bodies need. So that's one thing. The other thing I took away was that we need as great a diversity of bacteria in our gut biome as possible. And guess what? When we socialize with one another, we're not only raising our dopamine and our oxytocin levels, but we're getting bacteria from other people as well. And the more bacteria, the more diversity of bacteria we have, the better our bodies are able to produce molecules that help us fight off pathogens.
So that's advocating diversity in diet, but also social diversity as well, getting out more, because I mean, I'm the classic home worker now. There's me and my laptop and the puppy, you know. But this is really interesting because when we look at you know, those people in the blue zones and so on, I know there's some controversy around them, but when we look at people who have generally had longer lives, socializing and you know, being part of a social mix often comes up, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does come up. And, you know, it's interesting that the Surgeon General of the United States, Vivek Murthy, in his address to the nation, not this past year, but last year, was all about loneliness, how there's an epidemic of loneliness. And loneliness is not just about, you know, not having that interaction with other people. It has these other knock-on effects. So not enough dopamine, not enough oxytocin, the bonding hormone, but oxytocin is also an anti-inflammatory. But we're not getting those microbes, those diverse microbes. So if we compare the gut biome of someone a child, say in Italy, to a child in the African savanna, the one in the savanna has by far the more diverse gut bacteria. And that actually leads to healthier outcomes in life, believe it or not.
Yeah, I mean, our modern life has a lot to answer for, doesn't it? Sitting staring at these screens, there's not much diversity of bacteria coming from them.
Unfortunately, yeah.
No. And you started up an organization that's aimed at really helping us all live better for longer, which is very much what I'm exploring. I mean, how did that all come together, and what's the ambition there?
Well, the Oxford Longevity Project was really born out of frustration by Dr. Paul Chen, who was a GP, who was one of those frontline workers during COVID, who just, you know, all he could do was offer vaccines, right? He didn't even have enough PPE for his own staff. And we're here in Oxford, you know, this is one of the great research capitals of the world, and we didn't have enough PPE. He was trying to raise money to get this. And one of the things that he realized was that we need our patients to be better equipped with the knowledge of how to take better care of themselves. And Professor Dennis Noble, who is a cardiovascular physiologist at the University of Oxford, he and I had been talking about this. Sir Christopher Ball, who is a triple bypass survivor, former paratrooper and former warden of one of the Oxford University colleges, he also felt like me that patients have a responsibility to take care of themselves, but we don't know how. And And then Sir Muir Gray joined us, and having been Chief Knowledge Officer for the NHS, but with a staff of one himself, to get the word out. You've got to take preventative medicine seriously. With the five of us together, we really just want to do whatever we can to bring to the public's attention these very easy steps, interventions they can take to improve their health span, and therefore also their years of healthy longevity. There's no point in living longer if you are unhealthy. No one likes that. You don't have independence. You might not have independence of thought. You might not have the money to take care of yourself. If you don't even recognize your loved ones, then you have to go into care. And we don't all have money for that. And certainly the state doesn't have money for that for all of us. The whole point is just to get the message out about these things. So whether it's about the importance of exercise, which all of us know, if exercise were a drug, every single one of us would be prescribed it, or whether it's diet, just avoiding things like sugar, having things in moderation, having greater diversity of plants and in your diet, and getting fiber in your diet, whether it is to do with learning about things like fasting, because fasting in some cases is good for you and can activate this process, this Nobel-winning prize process called autophagy, or cell renewal and recycling. Or if fasting isn't right for you, getting more plants into your diet that have high levels of spermidine, which is a molecule that also activates cell renewal, recycling, and repair, that autophagic process. These are all things we want people to learn about. And it turns out that the interventions that we can do to make a big difference, they're not hard. They're not hard to understand, but we need to make them part of our daily routine, and or our weekly routine. So maybe that is doing park run every Saturday, right? Even if you just walk it, just start. Even if you just go to show up, the whole message is just go, because then you've got the social interaction, right? So just try to do one thing. And we try to offer this kind of smorgasbord of ideas that people can look at and just try one thing.
Well, I mean, we all need to take better care of our health. So I think it's a wonderful message, and awareness is the big thing, because I just have always had this sense that people feel that the decline is inevitable. Obviously, aging is inevitable, but there's so much more that we can do to maintain our mobility and our, our brain health, the lot, than we actually, or most of us actually think. And it's just how to get that message out there.
That's exactly it. So, we do try our best to get the message out to the press, but also from a grassroots point of view, just here in Oxford, Muir has a great ambition for us, which is that Oxford as a community is our lab. And we are famously a cycling city. So just getting more functional movement into our day, cycling around town for errands, cycling to and from meetings, which is something I do. I'm either running for a bus because I'm often late, or, I get on my bike and I cycle around town. And in all of those longevity hotspots around the world, whenever we see healthy centenarians, they are not going to the gym. They are building functional movement into their lifestyle. So they are walking to the piazza in Sardinia to meet their friends. And they may well have a small glass of wine, and they may even puff a cigarette, but I know, it's very controversial. And those men claim to be having sex into their 90s, and they say they don't have erectile dysfunction. And I'm thinking, and they're smoking? I don't understand. But this is what they say. But what we know is that they are moving. And when they shop, they are not getting in the car and driving their groceries home. They are walking up a hill, and they are carrying the equivalent of a 4 kilos worth of dumbbells up the hill. And it is that little bit of functional movement built into everyday life that is really improving their health span.
Yeah, which is
And
why gardening as well, when
gardening
you
is a
are
great
really
example.
moving and working the body as a whole,
Yeah,
bending,
yeah.
stretching, lifting, carrying. Um,
100%. And that's
yeah,
something that the Brits are great at, right? They love their gardens. And we also know that when you get out into nature, that the trees release a chemical called terpenes. These are anti-inflammatory molecules. That's why forest bathing or Shinrin-yoku in Japan is so popular, because those terpenes are very calming and
that's
have
so
this
interesting because
anti-inflammatory.
I love trees. The older I get, the more I love the trees, and we're surrounded by them, luckily enough, where I am, and I go out walking in them in the mornings, and I just love them, and there is a peace from
Yeah,
being surrounded by trees, and they're so beautiful as well.
they
That's
reduce
very
cortisol.
interesting.
They reduce cortisol.
Well, I think I feel it, and now I know why.
Exactly. I think we need to just be, all of us just need to be a little bit more proactive and remember that the only downside, well, there isn't really a downside. If one person turns up to a meetup like that, that's great. That's one more person than we had as a friend before. So we just have got to be more engaged and look at the low-hanging fruit that each of us is capable of making part of our lifestyle
Yeah,
to increase our health
absolutely. Yeah, because
longevity.
we don't have to be biohackers. I think that's often a misconception as well, that if you want to age well, then you have to be a
Yeah,
biohacker and really extreme. And
yeah,
I could improve my lifestyle across the board, but I'm
yeah,
also trying to balance life with enjoying myself. And so if that involves eating a treat when I want to eat a
yeah,
treat, you
yeah.
know, because I've got some of those other factors in play. I think that's it. It's just that balance, finding the right balance for us. Now, you're 59. Is
I
that
am
right, Leslie?
59. Yes, yes.
I have to ask because I can't tell from looking at you.
I don't have much makeup on, so
Well,
yeah.
you look fabulous. You've just got this, especially the hair is just so lustrous and shiny, and there's barely a grey there. I can't see a grey.
I think I might have some here.
Is
Yeah.
that a lifestyle thing? What do you think? Have you lucked out with the hair, or
So I will attribute the hair partly to lifestyle, can't be to genetics because my mother went gray at 50. My dad died at 39. I go to see my doctor every 6 months.
Mhm.
I invest in getting a full panel of blood tests done because I've got to
Mm,
monitor being a patient in remission. I
mhm.
always want to check where my C-reactive protein levels are. That is a marker of inflammation, quite cheap for people to get done,
Okay.
by the way. Just bear in mind that because of my autoimmune diseases,
Mm,
I run some expensive tests in
mm.
Germany for cytokines and something called tumor necrosis factor alpha. These were things that were extremely high when I had my lupus and rheumatoid arthritis and Hashimoto's diagnoses. I haven't talked about the Hashimoto's, but that kind of comes later.
Okay.
And so not everybody will need to do those, but let's just start with the basics, especially for women. Iron is one of the biggest mineral deficiencies on the planet, along with magnesium, especially for women because of our monthly bleed. And I see a lot of young women who say, I don't want to eat any meat because I love lambs, I love piglets, I'm not going to eat any meat. And unfortunately, every month they lose blood, they lose iron with that blood, and they become very anemic. Their hair begins to fall out. It can go prematurely gray if they do not watch that. So iron is number one. You check ferritin for that. B vitamins is another thing. Again, if you're not eating meat, you might not get all of those. If your gut is compromised, it cannot make these B vitamins that are so important, not just for hair health, but for color as well as pregnancy and fertility. We need folic acid. We need B12. B12 is also associated with mood. Just like in anemia, if you don't have enough iron and you don't have enough B12, a lot of vegans are like this, then you will find you have no energy because of the low iron, and you have low mood because no B12. And people who have B12 deficiencies actually can get catatonia, which is where you can't speak anymore.
Wow.
So
because
for
my
us,
mum has quite a severe one, but it was picked up, and so she just goes for regular shots now. She gets a regular injection of B12,
exactly.
and completely transformed her health. So
Mood?
that's a really obvious one. And her mood, she was very lethargic. She was just not in a good way, because she's 81 now. So I'm talking about her later 70s, this was picked up. What's interesting about that is I think I could probably go to my doctor and ask for them to run vitamin tests, say I'm feeling a bit run down or whatever, and they'll come back and say everything's normal. But then other experts and nutritionists will talk to you about, well, okay, there's deficiency, and there's suboptimal levels, which might still fall within what a doctor might describe as a normal range.
That's 100% true. I see this with vitamin D. I see this with thyroid hormone. So I am a hypothyroid patient. I am a Hashimoto's survivor. My Hashimoto's is in remission. That is an autoimmune disease where the thyroid gland is attacked. And in my case, I am missing 7/8 of my thyroid. So I don't
this
produce
cropped
much.
up, did it after you went into...
They didn't see it because they didn't do the test for the thyroid antibodies for some reason. They saw the high cytokines, they saw the high TNF alpha. For whatever reason, they could see it was lupus and RA, but they didn't pick up on the Hashimoto's. Only a few years later did anybody bother to do an ultrasound and said, God, it's almost like you have no thyroid. And then the doctors put 2 and 2 together. Right, so something has destroyed this. You have this history of autoimmune conditions. And how interesting, rheumatoid arthritis, lupus, and Hashimoto's thyroiditis often come as a trio.
Okay.
And so
you don't know which one drives the other. It's just maybe the underlying condition of the body, is it?
They're all caused by leaky gut, and it could be that the proteins that go across the gut into the bloodstream. So how this works, the lining of the gut is 1 cell thick. That's not much. Think of it as like one of those little plastic bags that you put your sandwiches in. It's so thin. And all the contents in your gut go through there, and the only thing holding them back from entering the bloodstream is that tiny cell layer. Now, when you have an irritation to the gut, there's a chemical called zonulin that's been studied at Harvard University. It causes the tight junctions of the gut to open up. So they should be tight like my fingers are woven together now, but they open up. And they allow undigested proteins from our food into our bloodstream, where the immune system is always present. The immune system is always in our blood and says, hey, this shouldn't be here. And it tags, like with a Post-it note, it tags that protein so that any other immune cell that wanders by says, wait a second, that Post-it note says we need to attack this and anything else that looks like this. Well, sometimes those proteins, they look very similar to proteins on our thyroid gland, in our joints, and in our organs. And that is essentially what happened with me, was that the proteins that got into my bloodstream and raised that autoimmune attack basically looked very similar to all 3 of those tissue types I mentioned: thyroid, joints, and organs. As a result, I'm very careful about trying to keep my gut nice and tight. Collagen helps with that. So making those homemade broths from bones that you get, chicken bones, like our grandmothers made, or even like beef bone broth, very good. You want that gelatin. And molecules like spermidine also will close up the gut lining. And these things are important for us to get in our diet to keep the integrity of the gut lining clean.
You supplement with spermidine. Is that the only supplement you take? I know that you have a company that produces that supplement, just to make people aware. But why spermidine? And is that the only one you take?
It's not the only one that I take, and the reason, but it is one of the key molecules I do take. And the reason that I decided to commercialize it was because the research done at the University of Oxford on spermidine and its ability to rejuvenate elderly immune cells. And rejuvenate is a word used in a scientific journal article that was peer-reviewed and published. When I saw that evidence, I thought we've got to bring this to market. But the university's investment vehicle, or the funds here in Oxford that commercialize the research conducted at the University of Oxford, were not interested because there's no patent around it, because it's a food. It's a molecule found in food. It's like saying, let's commercialize vitamin C, even though we know it's in oranges. So they just weren't going to do this. And it's probably the maverick in me that said, oh, is that really true? Can you not commercialize a molecule if it doesn't have a patent? I wonder if we could create a brand. Do you suppose people have ever heard of Oxford before? Is that a brand? Could that be a brand? Why don't we try that? And that's, that was just me being me thinking, come on, guys, this really should be out there. People should be able to get a hold of this as a supplement. And, when we're young, we don't need a supplement because our tissues make it, our gut biome makes it, and we get it in our food. As we get older, our tissues stop production. This is in our late 20s. And, we are then dependent on our gut biome and intake from plants to keep those levels of spermidine up. And if we have been overexposed to broad spectrum antibiotics, guess what? We wipe out huge swathes of helpful bacteria in our gut. They again make those wonderful chemicals that keep us happy and running well. And one of them is one class of bacteria we get rid of can be spermidine, the ones that produce spermidine.
Okay.
So that's an example of where you would want to top up. I take that, but I also take other things. I take B vitamins. I take hormone replacement therapy, bioidentical HRT. Something I feel strongly about. I take magnesium, I take B vitamins, I take glutathione, liposomal glutathione, which is a liver antioxidant. I take DHEA, not allowed in this country, but I get it in the United States.
DHEA.
That is a precursor to the sex hormones. And I take pregnenolone, which you can also get here in the UK. You can get pregnenolone here in the UK. At night, I take melatonin. Like DHEA, not available here in the UK, but readily available on the continent and also in the United States.
Yeah, sometimes if I go to the States, I pick some up at Target.
Yeah, you can get these, very,
Just
very
great
easily.
for jet lag.
Yeah,
it's great for jet lag. Yeah.
In any airport pharmacy, any airport in the US, they will have melatonin because it's great for jet lag, right?
Yeah, absolutely. The magnesium is an interesting one because I started taking magnesium a few years back because I was getting a lot of headaches. And then once these things go, you forget about it and you forget about the thing that you thought improved it in the first place.
Yeah.
And so how I was taking it was alongside vitamin D. So I had a supplement that had vitamin D, K2 and magnesium all in one supplement.
Nice stack.
Went on holiday, on vacation for a couple of weeks and didn't take the vitamin D because I was like, I'm going to be in the sun all the time.
Yeah.
And when in the few days leading up to coming home, I started getting these headaches. And then I got on the flight home. I just have never felt more ill in my life. I had such a bad headache. I could hardly open my eyes. I felt so sick. I mean, it was like classic migraine. And then after I got back, I just kept getting the headaches. And I realized that when I had come back, I did start taking another supplement, which was just vitamin D and K2 on its own, because I forgot to order my original stuff. And I thought, I think it's the magnesium. So I stocked up on magnesium, started taking it again, and all of a sudden they've stopped. And you think, well, it could be coincidence, but the pain came almost from like tension in my neck right up. That was the neck stiffness of the muscles that seemed to trigger it. And that's twice in a row that at different points in my life that magnesium has completely wiped out my headaches. So it's an interesting one.
Something like 75%, 70 to 75% of the American population is deficient in magnesium. And the older we get, the worse that deficiency becomes. But it's involved in over 300 enzymatic processes in the body. A lot of other downstream effects are related to having, they're reliant on us having enough magnesium in our body to make those other things happen. So yeah, magnesium is a big one, and I take it at night to help with sleep. And yeah, so that's kind of, that's.
And do you take vitamin D?
I do.
Yeah.
I, especially as a person who's mixed race, my mom is from Taiwan, so I've got my skin tone is that of someone from Taiwan, and I need really high UV spectrum light to convert vitamin D in my skin to make it happen. So I am always low. And I noticed my youngest daughter, who happens to be in the painting behind me.
Beautiful.
She also has very low vitamin D. So we both went to the doctor, managed to persuade them to do vitamin D levels, vitamin D test. And mine was 17 and hers was 11. We're basically approaching ricket level. Vitamin D. Yeah. And I'd been trying to have both of us take vitamin D drops. What I will say about vitamin D is that you can actually raise your levels up relatively quickly. The reference ranges, and we alluded to this earlier, the reference ranges to be healthy, I think in the UK are maybe around 25 or maybe 35. In other countries, you need to be above 50. Dr. David Perlmutter, who is an Alzheimer's and dementia expert in Florida, he actually advocates for levels well above 75, even around 90 to 100. That would probably be considered too high in the UK. What I would say is, get your blood tested regularly.
Well, you get the cheap kits now that you can just get at the pharmacies.
Do those kits, invest in those kits, and it's an investment in your health. Also, for people who are worried about premature gray hair or hair loss, that can be something that you can test for. You want to stay in the Goldilocks zone, really, and not too little, not too much, just right. So for me, that's around 70, 75.
You have done a biological test that put your age around 21.
Yeah.
Explain this to us. What was the test? And what do you think?
It was called the glycanage test, and actress and Bond girl Halle Berry did this test as well and shared her results on Facebook. So she's 2 years younger than I am, and she has type 1 diabetes, so another autoimmune condition. Her results came in at age 39, and she was thrilled with those results. Mine came in at 21, and I almost didn't believe it when I got these, and I did grill their chief scientific officer about this. But it does dovetail with my C-reactive protein test results, which just keep going lower and lower and lower. So C-reactive protein is a very cheap test that shows your levels of inflammation in the body. And the glycanage test is really looking at levels of inflammation and immune health in the body. And I can see that my C-reactive protein is at 0.3. Here in the UK, you would need it to be over, I can't remember if it's over 3 or over 10. Every country has a different level, but you would have to be over a certain level to get any doctor to say, oh, that's an issue. I think it might be 10 in this country. And for me, my functional medical doctor and endocrinologist would like it below 1. And mine just keeps going lower. So mine is at 0.3 is exactly the same as my 15-year-old, which I think is good. So, and my cytokines and my TNF alpha are way down. So all of these things seem to indicate that I don't have a lot of inflammation in my body. If that's because of all the interventions that I do, and again, I will emphasize, always start with the things that don't cost you anything. Having non-toxic people around you, people who love you, interact with people, have intimacy, have loving relationships, have, engage in functional movement around your home, in your community, eat nourishing foods, things that actually help your body, not things that rob it, like alcohol or sugar. And then, of course, anything to reduce stress is very important, and optimizing your sleep. I do all those things. I also I actively take anti-inflammatories. Those are things like omega-3 fatty acids, also studied by Professor John Stein here at the University of Oxford. That's Rick Stein's brother. And spermidine, which not only helps keep your hair in the growth phase so that it grows nice and long, you keep the color and it grows thick, but actually will keep your cells young, and the cells are the foundation of every organ, tissue, joint, muscle in the body. So maybe that's how it was done.
Yeah. And what do you think that means for you? I mean, we've talked about your goal being to age well, but I mean, do you have a specific goal that you're like, I want to live to 100, I won't be happy unless that,
it's not that. It's the goal is really to live as healthily as I can for as long as I can. And because I have friends of all ages, I mean, one of my scientific advisors, Dr. Sashi Senga, is 30. He's so young. And so even if other people my age are not around, I still am engaging with younger people. As long as there is interesting work for me to do, I'm happy to be around. And that goes for loved ones too. As long as my loved ones are here, then I want to be here. I want to continue to contribute. And Sir Christopher Ball, who's a mentor and one of my colleagues on the Longevity Project, he's 90 next year. He wants to live to 120 because he has so much to do. And I think that for those of us who've already had our children, they're growing up, they need us less. Honestly, this is great. It feels like I get a whole do-over on life. Only now I don't get stressed out. I don't care about judgment. People don't like me. I don't care. I can't please everyone. There's all this wisdom I have that I did, and confidence that I did not have at age 21. I don't want to be 21 again, but to have the wisdom of a 59-year-old and the biological age of a 21-year-old, that's great because my body can keep going, but I can think and make decisions with, the knowledge and confidence you get from being 59 and frankly not caring so much about a lot of things.
Oh, I think that is the perfect place to finish, I think, because what a positive note, and completely agree with you. For me, it's really just about quality of life. For as long as I have quality of life, I'd like to live it. And that's what I'm exploring day to day. Thank you so much. I've learned a lot and I've loved talking to you. I'm sure there'll be another opportunity, I certainly hope so, to catch up with you again.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for having me.
Some great insight there from Leslie, who is a brilliant example of how diet and lifestyle can have a dramatic impact on our health, both negatively and of course positively. So I will link to the Oxford Longevity Project website below. Just click where it says more beneath this video if you want to check out the advice that they share around living a longevity lifestyle. And you'll find a link below too to Leslie's spermidine supplement that she just mentioned there. For more information around how to age well, look and feel good for longer, check out my website honest.scot, and if you scroll down to the bottom of any page, you can sign up to my monthly newsletter where I round up all my latest content so you don't miss a thing. And remember, you can now listen to the Honest channel on the go with the Honest Channel podcast. It's available on YouTube Music, Spotify and Apple Podcasts. And if you haven't already, then don't forget to subscribe to the channel or follow the podcasts for more inspiring interviews like this one. But for now, thanks so much for being here today.